Rannick. What is our interrogator up to? Stealing the files from Zola, who was handpicked as an explicator by Grendyl because she's uniquely an expert on tertium, preventing her from accessing potential vital information for how to move forward with her operations. Weird. His insistence that the Karnak twins be killed instead of even trying to bring one or both of them in alive for interrogation is also an eyebrow raiser. These could be normal actions for a no-nonsense member of the Inquisition, but when you stack up the evidence and consider that even other officers on the Morningstar might not trust Rannick, his role in Darktide starts to have a hint of ode to traitor. But on the other hand, it's natural to not trust an interrogator. After all, the Inquisition's entire business is mistrust and suspicion. Obey my cat! Hit the subscribe button. So what exactly is Rannick's role on the Morningstar, besides public executions and single-handedly meeting the ship's arrogance quota? Because he's an interrogator, the only superior Rannick answers to is Grendyl himself, as he is Grendyl's apprentice. Being an interrogator is essentially the final exams before becoming an inquisitor yourself. These finals could go on for years, even decades before gaining the rank of inquisitor, if you lived long enough to make it. Interrogators get their rank and title for an obvious reason. It is in this stage that they learn many methods of interrogation. Inquisitors are renowned for inciting so much fear by their mere presence that many people find it pointless to even try to lie to them. For those with more resistant constitutions and vaulted shut psychic minds, Inquisitors use an arsenal of techniques from charm to violent psychic force to extract information from those unlucky enough to find themselves in their captivity. Interrogators must master this and show that they have the ability to put the continuation of humanity above all else, no matter the number of lives it costs, even their own, before being granted the status of Inquisitor. Throughout this process, the eyes of not only their Master Inquisitor are upon them constantly, but everyone around them, waiting for them to make a single mistake that would discount them completely from achieving their career goal. Because of this, interrogators as a whole are considered unwaveringly zealous in their enthusiasm for their job. They'll go to extreme lengths to meet the approval of their masters, even laying down their lives so their master can secure victory in the mission. And this, in my opinion, is where Rannick starts to get a little sussy. At a shallow glance, Rannick seems to check all the boxes for being a perfect Inquisition poster boy. He is comfortable with the cost of lives, our reject lives, it will cost to secure victory in Atoma. He is committed to rooting out traitors among the warband. He executes with prejudice and makes an example of those who would think to betray the Imperium of mankind to the darkness. But when you get to the Orthus Offensive, the script gets flipped. Instead of being enthusiastic about Zola's plan to bring one or both of the Karnak twins in for interrogation, Rannick berates her for her careless pursuit of Wolfer, arguing the number of rejects that have been lost to the cauldron outweighs any potential benefit of the mission, which we know is kind of flat out wrong. The very first scene of the game when the tutorial opens, Zola has Wolfer in a cell on the Tancred Bastion, the prison ship our rejects are also on, that seems to be bound for Atoma. Zola says Grendyl is waiting to interrogate Wolfer as soon as they reach the Hive. In one of the Darktide trailers before the game had its initial launch, we see the strike team from the cover art fighting Wolfer, and looking at his armor, we can be certain this takes place before the game opens. So this strike team was sent to bring Wolfer in and managed to capture him successfully. This makes it clear that capturing high-value assets to bring them in alive for interrogation is important to the operation and to Grendyl himself. Roden and Rinda being Wolfer's top lieutenants, the devilish duo he's counting on putting a stop to these crackheads armed with flashlights and a rock, would have extremely valuable information that could potentially help lead to victory in tertium. We know Wolfer feeds the twins information directly through their Vox intercepts and voice lines in the Orthus Offensive.
Orders from Wolfer. 8 bells, Trader's Row.
Meat for the cauldron. Right where he said you'd be.
If Grendyl wants to get to Wolfer so he can turn the screws on him, you'd think as his interrogator, Rannick would be falling over himself to make it happen. Instead, he almost seems to be outright sabotaging Zola and then trying to get her taken out over it. There's one exchange between Rannick and Zola specifically that made my ears perk up the first time I heard it.
You're not listening, Zola. I applaud initiative, of course, but the warband cannot afford willfulness. Grendyl will not tolerate it.
Grendyl gave me a free hand.
You know how we have labored to undermine Mobian morale.
This is very telling. When Zola says she's been given a free hand by Grendyl himself, Rannick doesn't argue this. In fact, he sidesteps it entirely and doesn't address it. Rannick is a very direct man. If Zola were lying, or even just mistaken in her permission to act freely, he would have likely called her out on it and pulled her off the mission right then and there for a lack of understanding and insubordination. The way that Zola gets cut off from our mission only when she makes it clear she's seeking the answer to a question might mean that perhaps Rannick has something to hide. The setup throughout her journals and the Orthus Offensive makes me think the implication is that Zola is seeking some kind of answer regarding Wolfer because she has some kind of personal relationship with him. However, given that the character progression storyline in Darktide revolves around you being suspected of being a traitor and the true traitor eventually being discovered, there's also the potential that Zola has reason to believe the traitor issue has not been fully resolved. Supporting this are the missions where the objectives are to gather information about or send information without being intercepted by traitors within the retinue. The fact that Mara Vinci, the woman that Rannick executes in the level 30 cutscene, is never outright seen committing any of the traitorous acts we're supposed to suspect her of, it's entirely likely that she was never even guilty, or at least didn't act alone. If Rannick was trying to hide something in the Orthus Offensive, and the information the twins had could potentially out him, Roden and Rinda dying, or the rejects dying and the twins getting away, would keep Rannick covered. And he is clearly determined on one of those two outcomes, given that he puts on a little pantomime of pretending to call Masozi for a pickup.
Lieutenant Masozi, the strike team requires immediate extraction. Yes. Yes, I see. Understood. Alternate extraction is not available.
This interaction right here is the only time in the game, as far as I'm aware, that a character who regularly appears in Vox communications throughout missions doesn't directly give us their own response. On top of that, Rannick's confirmation that extraction is impossible is immediate. When I first heard this voice line, I thought to myself, that's funny. It's like he's doing a fake call. And given that almost directly after Rannick tells us extraction is impossible, we go dispatch the twins and then presumably get extracted by someone to have ended back up on the Morning Star, it is likely that Rannick was doing a fake call, not just an awkward line delivery. Which begs the question, to what end? Why fake calling for backup and telling us extraction is impossible? Why not just kill us himself? This is kind of hard to say. It could be that he's trying to keep his direct involvement in taking anyone out to a minimum to keep suspicion off himself. To consider all options, it is also possible that Rannick is not a traitor and instead working to some end that protects Grendyl or supports him that even Zola is unaware of. But something about how insistent he is that the twins are to be killed instead of used for information really puts him in the crosshairs of suspicion. It is a little bit strange that an interrogator who is supposed to be so cold and calculating chooses to specifically stick Zola to the wall over the number of lost rejects. By all accounts, we're filthy convicts that would have otherwise been put to death as heretics and traitors. Even if at level 30 we become official members of the retinue, our penance for our sins has certainly not been paid. Not to put a finer point on it, but aspiring Inquisitors are expected to learn to accept the loss of billions of lives if it secures victory over the enemy of the Emperor's light. Rannick's willingness to die on the hill of not sending more rejects in after the Karnak Twins is a bizarre detail I just cannot get over. Could it be that Rannick is jealous or concerned about Zola outshining him? There are rare individuals who are so incredible at their jobs that they get fast-tracked to Inquisitorship. Perhaps Rannick is worried about securing his promotion. Or, when we see Rannick leering at us high in the Morning Star atrium, are his gears turning on something more sinister? This is actually something I'd really like the internet hive mind on. I know a lot of us are suspicious of Rannick, and I really want your thoughts on what skeletons you think he's hiding. Come join the Discord community, nerd out, and let's theorize about what's going on while we wait for Fat Shark to break their radio silence. Come on guys, you've got to be cooking something good, right? Right? Is Rannick a dirty Nurgle boy? Is it typhus? Are we finally gonna get some sign of Grendyl's actual presence? Gene steal?